Land is home, and you have to find a piece of land that you root yourself into that will heal you and bring you joy. And I think that for many African Americans who lost contact and connection with a homeland in Africa, this is also your homeland. This is where your ancestors started your foundation in America. And if you can find where they landed or where they grew a family and make that your home, then that would be a wonderful thing, a joyful thing, and a healing thing. It not only heals your mind, it heals your spirit, and it heals your body.
So what I think is so important about that is, first of all, is that we should be stewards of the earth, right? Good stewards of the earth. George Washington Carver believed that black health and soil health were interconnected, right? And so if you have a poor soil, you have a poor people. If you have a rich soil, you have a richer people, right? And so within that is a logic about what it means to care for our bodies, but also care for the earth that we are living on, right? Being good stewards over it. But also it's about the dissemination, right, of knowledge and education, right? Tuskegee understood that poor black people did not have the same resources, right, to get a formal education. And so they were invested in taking that knowledge into the countryside, right, to help black people be more self-determining, to nourish their bodies, right, and to help prevent them from going into cycles of debt and so forth and so on. And of course, taking that vision, taking those strategies and exporting it to the broader diaspora, Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, and so forth and so on.
This has brought back so many memories and stirred up so much of a connection for me. My dad was an avid gardener. He was the seventh son of a farmer in Rutherfordton, North Carolina. And in his later years, he became an herbalist. And he was an herbalist in Washington, D.C., and then moved here to Durham. So thank you, because it's in my DNA, and I just got to get there and find it. And last night, the movie, I know you all have heard, and the panelists that came on before this group really, really brought it home for me. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of the day. So now on to our panel. I'm going to start, Justin, I hope it's okay. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to start with Wamboy Ippolito, and she is the founding principal of Wamboy Design. It's an award-winning landscape designer and a horticulturist who was named one of 11 revolutionary female landscape designers and architects everyone should know, and that was by Veranda magazine. Her work is influenced by her early life in her native Kenya, and in addition to her garden work and landscape design, she lectures widely here in the States and internationally. Let's give a hand for our first panelist. Derek Hayes walks in the footsteps of African-American plant researcher George Washington Carver and Percy Julian. A trained botanist with a background in plant biology, Haynes, also known as the chocolate botanist. He has a social media following of, and I did a little research because I know the program says 10,000, but I researched and I thought it was 50,000, and now I have found out it's over 70,000. Like-minded individuals, and he has been featured on podcasts and in international publications such as The Guardian. Derek is paving the way for the next generation of young black botanists, ensuring a sustainable future rooted in shared knowledge and passion. Our third panelist, Terry Spate, a native Washingtonian like myself, is an author, former head gardener for the city of Fredericksburg, Virginia. She's a highly sought after speaker, a visionary, and a garden coach. She is the author of The Urban Garden, 101 Ways to Grow Food and Beauty in the City, and the recently published Black Flora, Inspiring Profiles of Floriculture's New Vanguard. Black Flora is the first book to feature profiles of contemporary Black experts innovating in the world of flowers. Now for our moderator, Justin Robinson. He is a Grammy award-winning musician and a vocalist, cultural preservationist, and historic food waste expert. He is a founding member of Earthseed Land Cooperative, which is a collective in Northern Durham consisting of farmers, entrepreneurs, professionals, and teachers engaged in creating alternative models for sustainability, equity, and cooperation within the communities of color. He is committed to helping African Americans rekindle their ties to the land. And our moderator, Justin Robinson. And let's give a round of applause for all of our panelists and our moderators.
Thank you for that introduction. Okay, so we are here to talk about the influences of African influences on the horticultural space, the garden space, the agricultural space, basically any way that African Americans have worked with land and plants. Okay, that's what we're here to talk about in this session. So I have some questions for our panelists here, some guests. It's not going to be technical, it's going to be about how you feel about stuff. Okay? Can we do that? Take the time. Okay, so my first question for you is, how are you inspired by your upbringing to do the work that you do today? I'll model a little bit. I'm inspired by my grandfather's garden. Every time I create a new garden, I end up making the garden that he made when I was 10. No matter how many times I thought, oh, I'm going to do something different, whatever, it ends up being that exact same thing every single time. So my question is for, we'll start here at this end, Terry. How are you inspired by your upbringing, your parents, your grandparents, the landscape you grew in, or alternatively, how are you inspired by the opposite? Like, I hated the way that things looked when I grew up, but I wanted to create something beautiful.
Well, my inspiration were my parents, basically. My mother's job, she was a homemaker. Every spring, we grew marigolds, coxcombs, which we now know as celosia, and portulaca. My dad planted her a rose garden with Mr. Lincoln roses. But there were always hydrangeas, whether it was in front of my house, at my mom's people's homes in South Carolina, and even here in North Carolina where my kinfolk are. My kinfolk are here. But the hydrangea, and what's funny is, it's 4 of us. My dad called us a happy bunch. All 4 of us have hydrangeas in our garden. So my parents really instilled the love of nature and getting outside and gardening in all of us. So the hydrangea has carried me through. And it is an inspiration because if you look at that bloom, the bloom is endless. And it is truly amazing.
Ooh, that's a hard act to follow. I grew up in a small town called New Bern, North Carolina. I don't know if any of you know New Bern, well, thank you, we're probably related. When it comes to my upbringing there, I can remember playing with plants ever since I was a child. Ever since I was 4 years old, being enthralled and surrounded by plants, not just outdoor, but indoor. So outdoor, my great-grandmother in front of her house had a hydrangea. beautiful hydrangea that just seem to be endless and effervescent, especially to a small child. My grandmother in her house had a long pole, so it's like 30 feet. Again, it just seemed to go wherever I know, right? 30 feet, amazing. So seeing those plants and seeing the natural greenscapes of North Carolina on the coast, playing with honeysuckles, running through the woods and forests, much to our family's chagrin, seeing all of these just naturally green spaces has made it to where when I make an area for myself or for family, I literally go in style of what I call Jumanji, where I just throw a bunch of plants in everywhere. Thank you for the couple of laughs. That was Jumanji. And I still do that because I felt so at peace surrounded by a plethora of plants. I hope others can find the same.
So I was born in East Africa, in Kenya, and I spent a lot of time, and still do, in the Rift Valley where my family has a farm. And if anybody has ever been to safari in East Africa, you know there's that wide, endless vista. So my understanding of the landscape from birth was something that is very wide and endless. So when I eventually, through the decades, ended up doing the work that I do, that was always my primary optic, creating the sense of a wide vista. I also happen to be the child of a woman who got both my parents gardening, but my mother is the real gardener. And she always had a beautiful garden wherever we lived in the world. My mother was a diplomat, so I was able, as a child, to live pretty much in many continents and was able to see how people gardened there and learn plants through my mother's gardening. But like I said, when I finally got to be doing the work that I do now, my endeavor in my work is to create that sense of space, of endless space. So my homeland has truly infected and affected the work that I do today.
I asked that question because I think that as human beings, we bring our ancestral landscapes with us wherever it is we go. Everybody does it, by the way. And so I want to ask a question. You touched on it, so I want to ask that question then. If you know your ancestral, well, let me model for you. My ancestors are from the savannah, right? We're from northern Nigeria, right, where there are not many trees. That is what I want to see every time I make a garden. I don't want to see a bunch of trees in front of my face. I want to see big trees in the distance and a bunch of grass. Okay? That's what I always try to make. It doesn't matter what it is. The tropical rainforest makes me want to jump out of my skin. It's too many plants. So, questions for y'all. What are the landscapes that make your body feel alive? Right? It could be mossy, down by the creek. It could be staring over the vista of grasslands. It could be deep in the rainforest where all you can see is plants. So,
Abundance. I know this is driving crazy. Abundance. I love it. Well, my mom's side of the family was from Grayport, South Carolina. The property in Grayport, all of the flowers and everything were either around a well, so they could go outside and cut a flower or two and put it on the kitchen table after they finished bringing the chicken for breakfast, which was really weird. But that was what I remember. And I remember a white iris, which I have in my garden now, that was right by the woods line. That's South Carolina, so there was a lot of flowers around and then right at the well. In North Carolina, it was totally different. There were hydrangeas, hard top. But then, in D.C., where everyone kind of migrated up to, my Aunt Edgenora had a wall of sunflowers. My parents' garden, I kept adding things until I got my father to put in that I think abundance. So my dad and I, just before he passed, we planted an abundant border of ornamental grasses, perennials, all perennials. We really didn't do much with annuals. And that wrapped around the perimeter of the yard. And up close in the carport was just wild and crazy. Tons of colorful clematis, any other perennial I could find, to try to get him to think my way. So abundance, that's what got me into even my yard now. I need to touch my plants. I need them to touch me when I walk there. Abundance, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree. So my horticultural gardening concept again is Jumanji. At one seed, not in the new one, because we don't talk about the new one. The original one, back in the 90s, where all those plants came up, there was just so many. That is my concept, indoor and outdoor. That is what makes me feel good, to know that I'm surrounded in that green space. So like, from working in a greenhouse and seeing a ton of plants, and it's hot, and it's humid, and I'm seeing all the green, I can touch the leaves or whatever the species are, to being in my own home and being able to do the same, going out to my patio and being able to touch all the plants that I've grown. Well, it's such a small space. I've grown so many plants. It is literally that. It is using what I have to get what I need, going back to my ancestral roots. I don't know all the way back to Africa, but I know we have been in a small sect of North Carolina, and New Orleans specifically, since like slavery, pretty much. So my historic family has been using what we have to get what we need. And I use that to just surround myself with plethora of plants, so many plants, so many times.
So I work in New York City, and where every square inch is cultivated. And there are 10 million landscape designers in New York City. So for me, and this is true, what inspires me is anything that is unspoiled by human hands. So if I see a piece of ground where nature is just doing her thing and it's just untouched, I feel calm. I feel like, oh, there's hope. They haven't discovered this space. So let's do that. So for somebody who does this as my, this is my bread and butter, to be able to say that anything unspoiled is what inspires me, I think I'm on the right track. And I think that we forget that. We forget that we are coded to see natural landscapes. We are not coded to see spoiled landscapes or organized landscapes. This is in our DNA, that this is our coding, that we need to see unspoiled landscapes. And so it is better for you to go out into nature, to drive out as far as you can to places where no one has grown anything, where no one is reorganizing and deciding that this is a weed and this is not a weed and we need to add this tree or that shrub here. That is what you need. And even like going to a railroad, we have the High Line in New York City. Everybody would go on and on about, oh, this beautiful thing, this High Line is so wonderful. They introduced all these native plants. And I was one of the people who were like, no, don't do the High Line. Because if you have railroads here that have been taken over by weeds, by wild shrubs, by native plants, that is the beauty. That is nature reorganizing herself in a way that is most pleasing and most healing to you on a DNA level. So that is what you need to be seeking. Thank you.
Love that. Great. Okay, I'm going to do a quick audience poll. Okay? Who, just raise your hand, please shout anything. Who likes the feeling of abundance? Like you want to walk through the plants and have the leaves touching you. I took it well.
Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds so bad.
But if you come to my garden, you'll see there's no plant to touch you. Who are the people who are more like me? You want to be around it, but don't touch my body. Okay. The grassland, people who like to look out into the distance like, this is beautiful. What about the people who you want to be snuggled down a little mossy brook where everything's green, and there's moss growing on logs, and you be down in the creek, and you basically in a video. And who likes the rocky, dry landscapes, like California, like Southern California, and that? Okay, wait a second. South that makes sense. We got all the plants you can stand here, right? You got all the plants, you can walk through something, you can touch our plants as much as you want to. You're in the right place. I was just wondering. So, here's my question for y'all, right? As folks who are coming from different places, right? Coming from different places in the world, different places in the United States, how do you bring far away ideas, right, into a space that already has its own ideas? Okay, so let me maybe frame that as a secondary way, right? For me, like my ancestors are not indigenous to the land. How do I find myself fitting here, horticulturally speaking, right? I need different plants that are going to, that speak to me in a particular way. How do we do that as we are sort of walking on this land that has its own ideas, and how do we see ourselves fitting into that? We'll start with you.
Well, I always say separation is a human thing. It is not a nature thing. So you are part of nature. You know, we always forget that we are part of nature. And you introducing your ideas is just nature introducing her idea, you know, because you are part of nature. Separation is human. This is human beings. You know, we chop ourselves up into tribe, clan, you know, ethnic, blah, 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 or whatever. But, you know, I'm past that. You know, I'm valid, you know, and my understanding of nature, my coming out of nature is valid, and I am very confident if I'm really feeling something, that nature wants me to do that. And so I do it, and then I keep it moving.
Ooh, let's see. My pastor has said that if all of us were the same, then none of us is not necessary. So my uniqueness, which I have hated, I've grown to love how I bring difference and my own self into the space of it. But getting that self-esteem with it, getting that appreciation of it is like the first step for me. And I think the first step for anybody. Because if I am trying to bring in a new view and I'm shaky on myself, I can let somebody talk me out of it. Part one. Part two, I acknowledge that what I have is valuable. Like what my perspective is, how I speak, how I talk, how I think is valuable. Not just within like my life as a botanist and speaker and all this jazz, but just in general. All of our different perspectives are necessary in some short, shape, or way in order for us to find success. So for me, I just go about it with, hey, I have this view, I have these skills, I can do this. Let's just go forward and come together and find success.
Well, the garden is here. That's just fact. I travel a lot. I love Paris. I love European gardens. I love storefront yards. Anywhere I go, I try to bring back a plant or food to incorporate in my garden of abundance because it is reminiscent of my journey. So when people come into my garden, they see me. They see me in the pine tree that I brought back from Buffalo last year. They see me in a dahlia tuber I might have brought back from Paris. They see me in the seeds I brought back from Giverny. They see me in the white iris from Lawrence, South Carolina. So the garden, my garden is me. It heals me wherever I go, wherever garden I visit. If I pause, something in that garden has touched my soul. And I'm going to incorporate it in Cottage and Court in some way, shape, or form. So that's how I do it.
Can I just ask Terry, just because Terry said something that reminded me of a book that I read. I cannot remember the guy who wrote this book. But it talks about the intelligence of plants and how plants make themselves beautiful because they have to survive. And by making themselves beautiful, it makes us want to own them and move them across the world. And then they create new communities.
Botany of Desire.
Yes. Botany of Design, exactly. So buy that book, Botany of Design.
Great. First of all, I'm going to give you your proverbial flowers before we even finish this. Is that your answers are so beautiful and so inspiring, right? That's like, oh yeah, I want to go back into the garden now and see what my new mission is. My next question is for anybody can go first moved, is there a particular lesson a particular plant has taught you? Right? Or it could be the garden in general. But what have you learned from the experience? Right? That you might not have known had you not been in the garden, had you not met this plant, had you not, been looking at this vista.
One plant right now, because every year it's different for me. I'm probably a collector. But last year, we had an excessive amount of days of 100-degree temps in the DC area. And I have a wonderful dog named Precious. I'm walking the dog and I see this little hot pink dot. I do not water my garden. There are people that need water more than my plants do. So when I plant you, I invite you to my garden. I water you with my milk jug, yes, my milk jug, a couple of times, and then I will be called me. I don't lose that many plants. I'm very serious. I always like to do my research. I don't lose that many plants. Annuals, I do roots, so I plant perennials. But I say this because we were walking last year. I had been away for 10 days to Buffalo, and this little hot pink dot just stood out every time I came up to my house. And when I looked closely, I was like, that's Flora, whirling butterflies. No water, 10 days with no attention. Hotter than hot weather. It was so hot last year in DC, it was insane. And that guara taught me the lesson of resilience. Sometimes we don't need to be watered. We just need to stand where we are and allow the blessings to flow. Now, I hope she comes back this year, but I think she is. I saw the basil foliage the other day, but that's what my guava taught me. Yeah.
Okay. Patience is what my garden and my planting has taught me. I'm not a patient person. A lot of people don't know that about me. I want what I want to be needed. I plant that seed of sunflowers into a pot. I hope the next day, it never happened. The next day, it's a beautiful sunflower looking down on me. The patience of waiting for these seeds to germinate, these things I put into the ground with care to give me beauty, has taught me that sometimes I do need to wait. And sometimes I'm waiting for something that may never come, and that's okay. I put seeds down in some very evil demonic squirrels or something, and so away while I wasn't looking, okay. But I know that my work wasn't in vain, and that I was still able to learn and process from it. So that's what it's taught me.
Mine's going to be a little different. Quinoa that everybody eats has taught me a lot. And what quinoa has taught me is to keep my mouth shut. Which is, when you know something is very, very wonderful and good, sometimes you keep it to yourself. Because when you share it with the world, in this rapacious, capitalistic world that we live in, it can quickly turn and morph into something terrible. Quinoa was feeding native South Americans with millennia. It was just their local food. And then somebody decided or found out, oh, this is full of, all the vitamins and minerals and everything, that this is a superfood. And then in short thrift, it's all in Whole Foods, it's all in this, it's all feeding hipster culture, it's all, and then it turns into this big, huge money driver. And the little guy in South America who's been feeding his family for nothing, for millennia, is thrown into lack. So there are many things that I know. There are many plants that I know, because of the work that I do, you know, or there's gardens that I know, so, oh my God, I can't believe people don't know this garden exists, or I can't believe people don't know, and then I just keep my mouth shut. Because I know that if it opens up, so sometimes that's the lesson, keep your mouth shut.
We've got lots of lessons to teach, but it's going to teach us all kinds of things. One of the questions or ideas I'm going to present now is that as African Americans, a lot of our body power has been used to reshape the land that we're on now, right? It did not look anything like this when Europeans got here. This is totally and utterly reshaped, right? Sometimes by us, but not necessarily by our own progression, right? That wasn't our idea, you know, plow up half of Durham County and turn it into its battlefield. That was not our idea. So the question is, how do we see, maybe the question is maybe this. I have felt myself as somebody as somebody's ancestors who were unwilling participants, right, in the harming of our native landscape. Unwilling participants in the harming of our native landscapes. How do we see ourselves moving in the landscape now, right? To me, it took me a minute to like process all that information. So I'm gonna throw this at y'all.
So, as a plant biologist, as a person from Eastern North Carolina, Geechee roots, I have some family and blood from like South Carolina, and learning how my ancestry were used, again unwillingly, against their will, to transform land with hand tools. Like imagine pulling up trees, big stumps, changing swamps into rice fields by hand. Here in Durham, I can barely dig in the clay by hand for a couple hours. At least I can stop and drink some Kool-Aid, but those people back in the day could, thank you, I'm hilarious. I keep saying I'm hilarious. Could drink some Kool-Aid, but the people in that time could not. So I am excited and grateful that I get to do whatever yard work, plant work, whatever I want under my own freedom. I am able to look at yards that may or may not be kept up to whatever level we may say by black and brown people and say, at least we have the right to do that. But I move through this world for me, thinking and considering how I can represent those people of yesteryear on the lands which my family has owned. How can I keep something that we built but we're not part of, something that we fed into, but we were not allowed to enjoy? And how can I then pass that enjoyment to other people? And how can I make sure that others know that you can get this flower and you can set it down and that can be your art? It doesn't have to be this big beautiful thing. You don't have to do what other people do. Or if you decide to go out and do big work, phenomenal, I'm down there with you, let's do it. So that's how I think, center myself around the ancestral connection to land and plants. In addition to just telling people about history and stuff, and making sure people know it.
Well, I come from a long line of educators on both sides of my family. South Carolina, we had one of the first black schools. North Carolina, Lord knows there's so many principals and teachers on that side. It's outrageous. So I think that from my sharecropping roots, my ministry is to educate people on the beauty and the joy of the garden. I'm a co-chair of a community garden in my neighborhood. A lot of the people in my neighborhood are very jaded. It's an African-American community in Prince George's County. Some of the people are very jaded. Things should be square shrubs, lawn grass that they never touch except to mow it. And I am enlightening people on the benefits of growing native plants, of having a meadow. I don't care if it's a 5-gallon bucket, if it's a little corner of your yard, in the community garden, or in our public space. I have an awesome city manager who maybe I call him a lot and I like him a lot, but he's understanding, he's getting the messaging. So we're incorporating meadows, we're incorporating benches throughout our city, we're increasing our tree canopy. This is all through conversating and educating. So I'm kind of following my ancestral roots by educating my community on how beauty can diminish crime and can bring us all together. Because right now, if we don't build community now, we're in trouble. So we gotta build community, and what better way to build community than through gardening?
Well, I'm clearly not African American. When I moved to Washington, D.C., I used to take piano lessons from a wonderful lady called Ruth Norman. Ruth Norman was an African American concert pianist and composer. You can Google her. And I remember that when I used to walk down, she lived about 7 minutes away from our house, and I would walk down to her home, and the neighborhood is called Shepherd Park. You can Google Shepherd Park too, which is a historically Jewish and African American community in Washington, D.C. And every garden in Shepherd Park was a beautiful garden. And in every house was either an older African American man or woman. And they were all somebody. They were always like the first somebody to do something. You know, the first one who flew a plane, the first one who did this or that. But I was too young to know that these were those kinds of people. But I know that I walked through so many beautiful gardens. So fast forward a couple of decades, I'm in school and I'm, learning about Monet's garden, and I'm going through those big tomes, about such and such. This is the garden you have to see. And I wondered, okay, I'm looking at my curriculum, I'm learning about all this stuff, but there's nothing about African American gardens. And I knew that I saw these gardens because I lived in Shepherd Park, and these people knew what they were doing. There was an old lady who used to live across the street from Ruth Norman, and she lived in this majestic pink stucco house. And she had all these roses on this pink stucco. And it wasn't a small pink stucco house. This was a woman who was someone. And she had gardeners who would come in and do all this stuff. So where's her garden? You know what I mean? So when I was in school, I asked the question. I said, it's great that mind you, there was nothing about Native American anything, in the curriculum. So when I asked this question, it was like, oh my God, yeah, So for me as an outsider, it was like, really, like this exists. It's been here. It's here. So when you, Mike, were talking about utopia, and I was reading your bio, I know of you and follow you and everything, and I was reading your bio, and you said self-taught. This is so much of what it is, self-taught. And the academy has been used to build a wall against people, primarily who are people of color, who are non-dominant in the society. The academy has been used to delineate. But who says that what you're doing, and we know that you're the only one doing it, here. Like, why is that not part of the academy? And when does it become part of the academy? And then this goes to record keeping. So, I would do my little designs, I would do my little notebooks, years and years ago when I started. And something clicked in me. I said, I need to keep all this stuff. I need to own all this stuff. And I say this because anybody who's ever been to Anne Spencer Garden and Museum, Sean spoke here last year. Sean and I were looking for records from her family. And they were all, and are all, in the University of Virginia. She doesn't even own her family documents. Because at a time in her life when she was gone, married, working somewhere, a board, a self-appointed board, decided, oh well, Sean's father died, so we're just going to gather all this stuff and give it to the University of Virginia. So now, and that's okay in the sense that it will live in the University of Virginia forever, but this is the type of stuff that you have to own. You have to keep those receipts. You have to keep those diaries, those little sketches that you do on the back of a napkin. That's history. That's a corpus of knowledge that you then pass down to the people for whom it matters most. And not to say that it doesn't matter most, because it is American history. It is American history, but it is family history. It is community history. You know what I mean? It has to remain in a place and in a way that is accessible to those who don't have the means to go to make an appointment at the University of Virginia, and then go there. And then, well, you can't see this because it's behind glass or blah, 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 blah. I hope.
I love how much we've talked about beauty today. I think it often, I'm a botanist, so I work for the state. And one of the things that we don't often, we are very serious about the science, like the local schools. One of the things that I think we often miss is the beauty part of it, right? This is why we're here. We want to see the beautiful things, right? Sometimes in conservation or botany or whatever, we actually miss the beauty part or all the other things. This is what I want you to do. This is a little bit unconventional. I want each of you to take us through the best garden that you've ever designed. So you're going to tell us what we're seeing. I invite the audience to close your eyes if you want to. You're going to tell us what we're seeing. You're going to tell us what we're hearing, what's under our feet. Is there a river nearby? Or do we hear the sounds of the city? Your best garden is to be real, is to be imagined, is to be your future garden. The best garden you've designed.
I think my best one was when I lived in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And the right-hand side of my yard was a shaded area, and I called it Contemplation Corner. When you entered the gate, on the right-hand side, there were perennial begonias. And when the sun came later in the day, through the fence, the backside of the begonia, which is red, it was almost like it was a fire. They were so beautiful. On the left-hand side was an alley of camellias, spring blooming and fall blooming, underplanted with many, many hostas. And I always used Virginia vines, pine bark, and mulch because it was very soft underfoot. I allowed the moss to grace the rocks, and I had a little water feature that you could barely hear, but I did that for a reason, because I wanted you to sit in Contemplation Corner. I have two daughters. When they were in disagreement with each other, I would separate them. The youngest one was like, you need to go to your room and read a book. The oldest one was like, I need you to go to Contemplation Corner and just be with nature. Then it became an argument of, but I'm going to read my book in Contemplation Corner. So, you know, finding places that are quiet, very meditative. I incorporate that in any design, even my current place in Maryland, and even in the community garden. We're designing the shaded area because a lot of our youth are troubled. So if I can create a space where they can sit and pause and not hear anything but the sounds of nature, that would be the best garden I could ever design.
I want to design Beyonce's garden. And if I one day meet Beyonce, that's a joke. My best garden is the garden that, my mom's garden, which I now garden. Close your eyes. So this is in East Africa. It is in a place where the temperature is always 78 to 84 degrees with a breeze and no humidity. They are very old trees. My dog, Noni, is buried at the bottom of the garden. There is a stream going by with bamboo, and the bamboo always shakes in the breeze and makes that wonderful rustling sound. Nairobi has every kind of bird you can imagine. So at 5 a.m., to 6 a.m., they start their bird song. And there's grass all underneath, it's about 3 acres. And there's no other sound other than the trees, the birds, the little brook. And in this garden, we have guava trees, we have banana tree, we have papaya. It is not an ornamental garden, it is just a very sweet home. Thank you. You feel it?
My best garden was my first, one of my first. My grandmother in North Carolina wanted some roses. And we went to a place that no longer exists called Plant Farm for the kids, and roses. And that is when I discovered Chinese tea roses, which smell amazing. Honey, apple, floral goodness, just all throughout this place. And we picked 3 roses, a bamboo, which was pink with a yellow center, a night, I think it was called Night Owl, which was a deep purple, just beautiful, rich, royal purple. And the last one was Sarah Grandin, I believe was a cultivar, which was a bright yellow. I haven't known about a couple of these in years. I put those down, watered them. It looked just like an unprofessional person did it. Because I did it 20 years ago, 20-ish years ago. Didn't really know what I was doing, but I put the plants down. And during that summer, the bees buzzing around, carpenter bees, much to my grandmother's dismay, buzzing around on the wood house. The bees, the pollinators are enjoying it. But just as you walk into the yard, the fragrance will just hit you with so much beauty. And even if you were in the back of the house, that beautiful, floral, sweet, rich fragrance could blow around the house. So amazing.
Go for it. Indulging in that.
What about you? What's your?
My garden, my best garden. I think my best garden, which I'm designing right now. You come down from the house and you walk down a little area that's wet. You're under a giant oak tree, so huge two people can't wrap their arms around it and touch the other person's hands. Walk past that to a rock path. You can hear all the little birds, this little lawn over there, the little robin, or hunting for worms, doing their bird song. And you walk into, you see all the spring wildfire flowers on this little slope. They're shaking very delicately in the breeze because I've chosen just the ones that shake just right. And then you walk on and you see the ancestral garden where we have all the dainty little flowers that might grow at a graveyard. You walk later, you stand on this little rock ledge as you look over into the wet meadow garden where the Joe Pye weed and the thistle is growing up so tall that are all covered in butterflies. And it looks like anywhere that you move, butterflies will just pop out of everywhere. That's my favorite. And it's in process, that's a real thing. Okay, this is going to be my last question, and we'll open up to questions to the audience. Where do you see the future, right, of land work, right? As we see the next generation coming up, as we're hoping to influence and educate and train up the next generation, where are we and where do we need to go?
First of all, we need, as Walden Boyce said, we need to document our stories. April Lee was here last year, and all of us are working on celebrating Negro Garden Clubs, or African American Garden Clubs. I'm so glad you're still with us. It's hard. A lot of those things have been discarded. A lot of our stories have been discarded. We need to start writing our stories, because that's going to be part of our future. If 10, 20, 30 years from now, we still can't reflect on what grandma grew, what was planted on that side of the house or the barn or whatever, once again, we're in trouble. So we need to document our stories so that there is a blueprint from which we can work from to continue and educate the future. And then go to school, get education, so that we can become a prominent voice in the work that is already a part of our DNA.
I worry about land access and ownership in the future, especially Black and brown people. Again, I come from Eastern North Carolina, and I can see and remember from the youngest 10, I'm a child of the 90s, but from the youngest 10, seeing Black areas being gentrified, and seeing historically Black areas where we've been, even to some points since like slavery's end, being erased. So that information is being lost, that land is being lost, that ownership is being lost, and all that loss would make it difficult for the next generations to gain it back because of a lot of other things going on in like the political climate. But outside of that, which is a real tough pill to swallow, I would imagine that, especially after COVID, where a lot of people are turning to gardening, there would be a passion for newer generations, younger generations, to find a way to own land and to find a way to continue to connect and to even reestablish that connection that our ancestry had with plants, with gardening, with agriculture.
So in the previous iteration of my life, before I went back to school for landscape architecture and design, I worked in the non-governmental field. So I worked in World Bank, OAS, UN, that world. So I dealt a lot with population shifts and what big groups are doing around the world. And one thing that has really helped me in my understanding of what happens on this planet is that at any given moment, your plan can go south because of an earthquake, because of a war, so I don't, I know you worry, but I also know that like my grandmother used to say, people are like a river, they come and they go. So stuff comes and it goes. What I always say is that you have to make sure that you have a place where no one can, if they cannot move you. They cannot move you from that. That is yours. And if you have that, look for Plan B. And Plan B, make sure Plan B is very far away from where Plan A is. But always know that in as much as you plan and, we'll be doing roof gardening and we'll be doing, horizontal hydroponics, whatever. At any given moment, it can be a war, an earthquake, an economic depression that will change everything. So my goal in life has always been to create community, And Abra, who was here last year, Abra is my best friend, and I was talking to her yesterday, and she said something. She said, my boy, whatever happens, I know I can come to Kenya with you, and I'll be okay. You know what I mean? And I have friends in other places, and if anything happens in Kenya, I know I can come be with you. If you create community, because that is what why are we here? You know what I'm saying? Why are we here? And what are we holding on to? What are you holding on to? Are you not holding on to each other? What are you holding on to? Even in my work, people say, one of 11 landscape designers, you should know, blah, blah, blah. My work has moved completely from creating beautiful gardens to actually mentoring people. The people who come and they're like, wow, boy, I would really like to do what you do. Okay, well then let's get you into school. Well, let's get you a scholarship. Well, let's get you to a place where you can do this work. That's what my work has become now. You know what I mean? So if you see yourself in this work as how is it benefiting humanity? You know what I'm saying? Because you can help one person get a job, and that person will feed his family in Mexico, will feed her family in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? So that's how I look at it. I don't hold to where we'll be 20 years from now just because I understand how the world works. I am more focused on my immediate impact in another human being's life. And if we can just do that, then so much of what we see as problems and the planning and that just goes out the window because the gratitude and the gratification is right now. You know what I mean? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up now. We have a few minutes for questions from the audience for any of the panelists here, comments, thoughts.
If you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you so we can make sure that everyone can hear the important information that you want to share and exchange. And we also have a microphone up on the second level. So just please raise your hand and I will get it to you.
I'm Key. Thank you all so much. I'm sitting back here crying. It's been a very beautiful day so far. And the question that can be for anybody is an interesting piece of history that's been woven into your garden, whether that be from your family or community, but something that, a piece of history that you feel is documented in your garden.
Great question. The question is there a piece of history that has been that you have documented in your garden?
One piece of history that's kind of woven into my garden is I am from a line of plant people. One thing that some black folks do is they wait until somebody dies to ask you if you didn't know something. So I have a great uncle, my great grandmother's brother, who had a plant store. They were like, "Oh, you don't remember that?" And I was like, "Well, when did I go?" "Oh, you were 3. Why would I remember it?" I was 3. But he had a plant shop in New Bern. My great grandmother had a garden and a farm that I always seemed like to bring this up as she was older when I was coming up. My grandmother loved plants. I have a cousin that loves plants, another that has lawn care. So I carry a gifting, a calling to the plants through my family when I do plant stuff.
Well, the white iris from Lawrence County, South Carolina. As it expands, I share it with anyone in my family that gardens. And on the inside, I also plant a sunflower in honor of Aunt. But on the inside, I have a snake plant that my great Aunt Dealey had. And it has been passed down through our family. I believe she said since they migrated up from South Carolina. So we keep that snake plant going. Everyone that wants a piece has a piece because that's our history. And that's like our DNA consistently being passed from one person to the next.
So in Kenya, we have plants that my great grandmother and my grandfather planted that we just keep cutting and moving around the landscape. But the best thing that we have is their grapes. So right outside my mother's kitchen window, my husband almost had a heart attack when he came because there's a bunch of grapes right outside the kitchen window. So my greats, my grandfather and my grandmother are out there. And if you have land here, if you just cut off your hair and put it in the ground, you are forever connected. If you clip your fingernails and put it down there, you know, whatever, just put a piece of you in your family land, and you will always come back. I'm very African too. I know this. I've given you a very big secret. If you want to buy some land, just cut that block off and go there and put it in that ground. And one day, you will own that land.
Are there any questions from up top?
Well, it was such a good, yeah.
If not, I'll answer my question. I'll answer that question that you asked for me. my mother's ancestors, my grandmother, great-grandmothers, my great-great-aunts, the people who we know who came out of slavery are all buried in this one cemetery in South Carolina. I work from rare plants, and there's a lifetime plant that I wish I could be able to see. It's called Carolina anemone, tiny little plant. Never seen it in the wild, never seen it anywhere, only seen it growing in pictures. Except for that it's growing all over my ancestors' graves. So I've taken out some of those from my ancestors' graves and brought them into my garden, and I consider it an ancestral plant. And, funny story, the action, the medicinal action of anemones, the genus is anemone, is for shock and trauma. That's how you use it medicinally. So it feels appropriate for growing.
And I have a question. You said you have an ancestral garden in your home. Are you planting that thing?
Any final questions? We round up our time. Okay. There's a question.
Oh, very good. So what's your favorite way of sharing your love and knowledge? I know that you're a social media star and you write books and you are a professional horticulturist, but in your heart and in your way of being in the world, like what's your favorite way of sharing this with people?
Is that directed to me? Oh, yeah. What's your favorite way of sharing?
Talking to people. I'm an educator, so anyone from my workplace, the young kids, because they've not been exposed to the garden. They had gardeners growing up, so they found it fascinating to touch a real cotton ball, which really threw me for a loop, but they got a history lesson. So just talking to people is the best way, in my opinion, to encourage others to get in touch with her and connect with it.
I agree, talking to people. I'm not a people person, but I love talking about plants. I will talk for hours about several things, including plants. And especially with the advent of social media and me being able to talk to so many people there, it has allowed me to not only share my stories and my history, but for me to learn from you all who I've met with. Like Terry, for example, we had a talk years ago. I took that stuff in. It was like, this is great, this is awesome. So just being able to connect with people across whatever platform, in person, in a conference, online, whatever.
I like to talk and I like to teach when I'm working. So if crew members, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I love to talk, so call me next year.
That's also true for me. The best way to impart this knowledge is to be out there and talking and let the vibrations of your own voice reverberate against the plants and let it come back to you. It really is. It's nothing like being in the space with folks. I think that's our time. I want to give, will everybody please give a big hand to our panelists. And I want to personally give a shout out to Carter Q, who has made this thing possible.